In my past life I was the heir to a fortune, the beloved daughter in a mansion full of secrets. But love can be a mask, and family can be fatal. The night I turned 25 they locked me in the attic, set the house on fire, and watched from the garden as the flames swallowed me whole. And when I returned, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I came back as the maid. Smiling, silent, and ready to burn them from the inside out. There are deaths that take your breath. And then there are deaths that take your soul. Mine was the latter. My name was Serafina Elwood, heiress to the Elwood estate, the sprawling mansion built on old coal money and even older blood. To the outside world we were American aristocracy, pristine, philanthropic, charming. But behind those iron gates was a dynasty held together by lies, blackmail, and poison. I should have known. But I believed in family. I believed in the lullabies my mother sang and the cold kisses my father gave. I believed in my cousin's laughter and my aunt's stories and the promise that the Elwood name was mine to inherit. And on the night of my 25th birthday, that promise was finally fulfilled. At least, that's what I thought. The will was to be read at midnight. Grandfather had passed 2 weeks earlier, and with no son of his own left, the fortune and the mansion was to go to me. I wore the sapphire dress my mother gave me. I smiled at the guests, toasted champagne, and pretended not to notice the way my cousin Miriam watched me like I was a stain on her silk gloves. "You've always had it easy," she whispered as she passed me in the hallway. "But it ends tonight." I thought she meant it figuratively. He didn't. I remember the scent of smoke. I had gone to the attic to find an old ledger my grandfather used to keep. I remember the latch closing behind me, the lock clicking, and then the fire. Fast, unnatural. It clawed through the walls, hungry, guided. I screamed until my voice broke. No one came. The last thing I saw through the cracked window was my family in the garden. Watching. Not one of them flinched. Not even my mother. I should have died. The last scream should have been my own. But death had other plans. Because I awoke, in pain, gasping, in a stranger's room, my skin smooth, my hair long, my voice whole. I stumbled to the mirror. And saw my 17-year-old face. No scars. No ash. Just wide, terrified eyes. I was alive. Not reborn metaphorically, literally. I was back in time. Back in my body. 1 year before the fire. And this time I remembered everything. For a while I hid. I didn't know how to exist in the house that would become my tomb. I watched my family from behind doors. I watched their lies unfold again, their manipulation, their greed. I listened to them plan, flatter, and betray. But most of all I watched Miriam. Because I hadn't realized in my past life just how much of the puppet strings she had been holding. She was the one who convinced them I was unstable. She was the one who bribed the staff. She was the one who set the fire. And this time, I wouldn't be her cousin. I would be her servant. 1 month before my 25th birthday again, I faked my own disappearance. I made it look like I'd run away. Left a note. Dropped personal items by the lake. Enough to create chaos without alerting suspicion. The family panicked. My mother cried. My father blamed scandal. And Miriam? She smiled. Because in her mind she'd won. But what none of them expected was the new maid who showed up a week later. I called myself Lena. Wore my hair differently. Dyed it darker. Wore tinted glasses and plain clothes. I dropped my posture. Changed my voice. The staff didn't look too closely. They were underpaid and overworked. No one questioned the new girl scrubbing the silver. And the family? They barely glanced at me. Rich people rarely look at the help. Which was exactly what I wanted. I became their shadow. Their silence. I scrubbed floors during their meetings. I served tea during their whispered threats. I changed sheets in the guest rooms where bribes were passed. And in the attic, the very attic where I died, I found the blueprint Miriam used to sabotage the estate's wiring. It was still there. Filed under renovations. I copied every page. It was then that I realized the Elwood fortune wasn't just corrupt. It was cursed. Generations of secrets. Buried under blood and sealed with smiles. I found old letters between my grandfather and an anonymous informant. Notes about land deals, missing people, payouts. There were whispers of another heir. One hidden. One they erased. And it was tied to me. To my father's brother. The one they said had died of an illness. What if he hadn't? What if he was the reason they wanted me gone? I took everything I found and stored it in a locked chest in the gardener's quarters, my safe space. And I began writing my plan. Not to kill them. No. That would be too easy. I wanted them to crack. To destroy each other. To fear shadows and whisper ghosts. I wanted them to see the girl they murdered in every reflection. To doubt their own minds. To burn from the inside. Because this time I wasn't going to be their victim. I was going to be their reckoning. On the last page of my journal I wrote, "They killed Serafina Elwood. But Lena has no rules. No title. No face. She is everyone and no one." I stood in the attic that night staring at the singed floorboards at the broken latch. I placed the old family portrait on the wall. One with everyone smiling. Except me. I'd scratched out my face with the edge of a silver fork. Because the girl in the painting didn't exist anymore. And the woman who returned was about to set the whole house on fire. The Elwood estate was quiet before dawn. Cold stone hallways. Oil paintings with dead eyes. Whispers that echoed through empty rooms. I moved like breath, unseen and unfelt. By now, I'd learned to match the rhythm of a servant's life. Rising at 5, scrubbing silver, and listening with the stillness of someone the world forgets. That was the secret. People will say anything when they believe you don't matter. And I had mastered the art of not mattering. 3 weeks had passed since I disappeared. My name was still on the news in clipped headlines. Elwood heiress fled or foul play? Family offers reward for information on Serafina Elwood's whereabouts. The press speculated. The police snooped. But inside the mansion, behind thick curtains and older money, the family moved on. My mother mourned for cameras. My father smoked cigars on the terrace like nothing had happened. And Miriam glowed. She was poised to inherit everything. The lawyers had already begun revising the estate's documentation. If I was declared legally dead, Miriam would take it all. She had even moved into my old room. I cleaned it now. With gloves and quiet rage. She had hung a new portrait where mine once was. Her in a crimson dress, staring into the distance like a queen in exile. But she didn't know what I'd hidden behind the wall panels. She didn't know what was coming. My first move was small. I left her window open one night. Just enough for the wind to scatter her letters. Just enough for her to think she'd forgotten. Then her shoes began appearing in the wrong closet. Then a single glove went missing. Then came the photo. A copy of the Elwood family portrait with her face scratched out, slipped beneath her pillow. She screamed. Called for security. Blamed the staff. They searched everyone's quarters. Mine too. But I had burned the gloves. Hid the negatives. Played the part of the trembling maid just well enough. Miriam began locking her door at night. And that was exactly what I wanted. My next target was Aunt Eugenia. She had smiled as I choked on smoke in my past life. Always watching, always sipping tea. She called it God's plan, when she arranged to have my medical records fabricated. Said I was unstable. Said I needed to be contained. She had been grandfather's nurse before marrying into the family. And she still kept his medical journals under lock and key. But no. I had a key of my own. Harold, the night butler, had weak wrists and a gambling debt. I left an anonymous envelope under his door. Unlock Eugenia's study. 10 minutes. You'll find $500 in the drawer. He did. And I slipped inside with the silence of someone returning home. The journal revealed everything. Grandfather had planned to name me sole heir. Not just the estate but the hidden trusts tied to overseas properties and blackmail accounts. He feared what the others would do to stop it. They proved him right. And tucked within the back cover was a photo I had never seen. A boy. Same green eyes as mine. Handwriting beneath it. James. If anything happens to me, he must never find out. James. My father had no brother, or so I thought. Had they lied about that too? Had the real heir vanished long before I did? The more I uncovered, the clearer the rot became. This wasn't a family. It was a hive of snakes. And I was done playing prey. That night I planted seeds. In Eugenia's drawers I left grandfather's journal, but with one page replaced. A forged entry in her husband's handwriting. I never trusted Eugenia. If anything happens, she's behind it. By morning she was pacing the halls, whispering to herself. By evening she had burned the journal. And the staff began talking. Gossiping. She's losing it. Lady Eugenia hasn't been sleeping. Did you hear her shouting in the mirror? One of the housemaids asked me quietly. Lena, do you think she's haunted? I smiled. By guilt? Absolutely. The only person who truly unnerved me was my father. He had always been quiet, controlled, dangerous in stillness. In my past life I never questioned his silence. In this life I saw it for what it was. Complicity. He hadn't saved me, because I was never his priority. He had another secret I hadn't yet cracked. One he hid in the West Wing. A room always locked. A room no one spoke of. I began watching him. At 3 a.m. he slipped out of his bedroom. I followed in shadows, barefoot and careful. He opened the forbidden door. Inside, a study lit only by candlelight. The walls lined with old books, military records, photographs, and one in particular that made my stomach lurch. James Elwood, grandfather's son, still alive. The last known address was in Europe. Why had they erased him? Why had they never spoken of him? And more importantly, where was he now? I copied the address, memorized the records, and slipped out unseen. But the next day something changed. Miriam stared at me longer than usual during breakfast service. She narrowed her eyes when I poured her coffee. She looks familiar, she said aloud. Too loud. Eugenia glanced over. My father didn't blink, but he did pause. They were starting to see cracks. I needed to move faster. So I set my next trap. The attic. The place of my death. I left the door ajar during a rainstorm. I let the wind howl through the halls. I dragged a trunk across the floor at 2:17 a.m., just loud enough for Miriam to hear. She burst into the hallway shrieking at staff, demanding to know who had been up there. No one confessed, because no one had been. Except me. The next day she summoned a priest for spiritual cleansing. And in the mirror of her bedroom I left one line written in steam. She never left. The Elwood mansion had grown colder. Not from the autumn chill slipping through the cracks, but from the quiet unraveling of the people within it. Miriam had stopped sleeping. Aunt Eugenia had started whispering to empty chairs. My father's calm had turned into stillness too sharp to be sane. It was working. The plan. The whispers. The ghost I let them believe existed. And I was the one feeding their fear piece by piece. Because I remembered what they had done to me. No. I was reminding them. The tipping point came on a rainy Tuesday. I was dusting the parlor when I saw Miriam slip into my old bedroom, now hers. But she wasn't alone. A man followed. Early 30s. Suit. And a state lawyer I recognized from the past life. His name was Benton Reeves. In my first life he had arrived after my death to oversee the transfer of ownership to Miriam. He had told the media I left a letter. That I had chosen to disappear because I couldn't handle the pressure of inheritance. That letter was forged. By him. And now he was back. I pressed close to the wall and listened. She's not legally dead yet, he said. She will be, Miriam snapped. Just write the documents and prepare the transition. I need something official. A sign of mental instability. Evidence of her disappearance. Or, the body. Miriam was quiet. Then, you think I don't know that? We had a plan. You said she wouldn't come back. She hasn't. But things are happening, she whispered. I hear footsteps in the attic. Someone moved my mirror. The staff says they see her at night. You're rattled. No, her voice shook. I'm being watched. He was right. The next day I left a message on her vanity in red lipstick. Still warm in the walls. She screamed. He's the staff. Accused Eugenia. Locked herself in for hours. And while she trembled, I copied files from Benton's briefcase. Legal documents. Plans to dissolve my portion of the estate. Undated death certificates. All unsigned. Not yet. But close. And when they were ready to push the final piece I would be waiting with the blade. Later that week I found something in the West Wing. A hidden room I hadn't entered since my return. The study behind the library shelf. It was where my father had kept things he didn't want the world, or me, to see. In my past life it had been sealed. In this life I had the master key. Inside. Files, photos and old tape recordings. And buried under loose floorboards, a small black box with a locket I remembered too well. It was my mother's. Except, this one had a photo. Not of me. Of a boy. With my eyes. And behind it an ID. James Elwood. Birth date, 1992. Adopted. Hidden. My half-brother. Not dead. Erased. The final piece fell into place. I was never meant to inherit. Neither was Miriam. The real heir had vanished. And they killed me because they thought I knew. But now I did. And I would use that truth like a torch. That night I called Benton using a voice modulator and an old burner phone. I know about James, I whispered. He paused. Who is this? Doesn't matter. But if you sign that certificate, everyone will. Is this a threat? No, I said. This is your only warning. Then I hung up. The next day he left the estate. Quietly. Without finishing the papers. And Miriam? He spiraled. I left her a gift that night. A small bundle of ash tied with blue ribbon. The same ribbon that once held my birthday cake together. The same cake she smiled at while I ate poison. She found it on her windowsill. When she opened it she screamed. Because tucked inside the ash was the scorched chain of my old locket. The one I wore the night I burned. She locked herself in her room for 2 full days. By the 3rd day she had summoned a private priest. Not for confession. For exorcism. Eugenia began cracking next. She caught me dusting the hallway and grabbed my arm. You were there, she whispered. In my dreams. In the mirror. I blinked. Ma'am. You're the girl. The one who screamed. I leaned in gently. I clean mirrors, ma'am. Nothing more. She trembled. You look like her. I tilted my head. She looked like me. Then I walked away. But it was my father I saved for last. Because he was the one who knew. Not just about the fire. About everything. I waited for him in the study. Sat in his chair. When he arrived he didn't flinch. You've grown bolder, he said. I've always been bold, I replied. You were just too cold to see it. He narrowed his eyes. Who are you? You know who I am. He studied me. Then he smiled. A thin, horrifying smile. I told them not to do it, he said. But I didn't stop them. Does that make me better? No, I said quietly. Just next. It took me 3 days to reach James. I used a contact I'd built in my first life. One who owed me a favor after I helped him cover up a scandal with a local senator's daughter. He didn't recognize me now, of course, not in this new skin, not as Lena the maid, but he remembered the favor. And in return he gave me the address. Milan, Italy. A small, private boarding school for young men under reform. The kind of place where inconvenient heirs were quietly placed under the guise of mental health recovery. I remembered now, whispers about my father's sick brother. The boy who'd lashed out as a teenager. The boy they said had died of grief. Lies. James had been hidden. Because he was legitimate. Because he was firstborn. Because the Elwood fortune was meant to be his. And now he was a ghost. Just like me. I sent the first letter in code. Simple. Handwritten. No return address. Their names you forgot. They didn't. If you want the truth about your birth, find the house with the attic. Find the girl they buried. Find me. No signature. Just an old photograph enclosed. It was the 2 of us as children. I had no memory of it, but the eyes didn't lie. 2 children on the same marble steps of the estate. Same green eyes. Same cheekbones. One disappeared. One burned. Now both were back. 3 weeks later he arrived. Not at the front gates. But through the forest trail in the middle of the night, like a shadow answering a summons. I was waiting in the greenhouse. My sanctuary, now Eugenia's self-imposed prison. She had stopped gardening long ago, now obsessed with praying to plants and whispering at her reflection in the glass. She didn't even notice us pass. James looked like memory twisted by time. Haunted. Sharp-jawed. Quiet-eyed. He stopped when he saw me. You're the girl, he said softly. From the photo. I nodded. And you're the one they erased. We stood in silence, 2 phantoms under moonlight. Then he said, tell me everything. And I did. We spent 3 nights buried in the West Wing, digging through old letters, hidden account statements, the locket, the journals, even the rewired blueprint of the attic fire. His hands trembled when he held the will. It's signed, he whispered. By grandfather. Dated 3 days before my transfer to Milan. You were the heir, I said. They didn't want me. No. They didn't want anyone they couldn't control. His voice cracked. They made me believe I was crazy. They made me believe they loved me, I whispered. We looked at each other. Not strangers. Not siblings by coincidence. But survivors of the same storm. No. We were the storm. It was time to make the family feel what we had felt. Powerless. Wanted. Forgotten. The plan started with the dinner. A private family gathering. No staff. Just blood. I arranged it under the guise of new inheritance updates. A lie guaranteed to bring every vulture to the table. Miriam came in pearls and paranoia. Eugenia clutched her rosary like it might protect her from judgment. My father arrived last, composed and blank-eyed. They didn't notice James seated among them. He wore a staff uniform. Hair slicked back. Not one of them registered his face. Because the wealthy rarely see the people who serve them. I stood at the head of the table. Still just Lena the maid. I said, "Let's begin, shall we?" I handed out black folders. Each one marked with a name. Each one filled with copies of the documents we had uncovered. With the true will naming James as heir. The forged psychiatric files. With the transfer orders signed under duress. The blueprint of the attic's electrical malfunction. Photographs of burned evidence they thought gone. The locket. And a photo of me the night before the fire. Miriam's hand trembled. Eugenia's face went white. My father didn't blink, but his lips twitched. And then James stood. He removed the hat. Let them see. Let them choke on the past they buried. You know me, he said calmly. You called me sick. You institutionalized me at 15. You told the world I died. No one spoke. He turned to Miriam. You rewrote the will. She flinched. He turned to Eugenia. You bribed the doctor who signed my confinement papers. She gasped. Then to my father. You watched it all happen. Still silence. Then I stepped forward. And removed my glasses. They saw it finally. Serafina, my father breathed. No, I said. You killed her. What's standing before you is everything you couldn't destroy. Miriam stood abruptly. This is madness. You're dead. You're both frauds. I opened the projector. Displayed a live feed. From the office of the family's lawyer. He had agreed, after some persuasion, to record a new video will statement with James present, DNA test in hand confirming his bloodline. The lawyer's voice rang through the room. I confirm that James Elwood is the biological son of Henry Elwood Sr., and is the rightful heir to the estate and all attached trust holdings. Then I played the second clip. A compilation of audio recordings we'd gathered. Miriam speaking about removing Serafina, Eugenia bribing Benton Reeves, and my father saying the words. I told them not to do it. But I didn't stop them. It was enough. More than enough. To ensure none of them would ever see the fortune again. The Elwood mansion had never felt so silent. Not like peace. Like aftermath. Miriam no longer stormed the halls in silk robes. Eugenia's rosary hung abandoned on her bedroom doorknob. My father's study, once the command center of manipulation, now stood locked, the key left on the grand piano like a symbol of surrender. I had turned their whispers into screams. But this wasn't victory yet. It was only the unraveling. And now came the part one had waited for. The erasure. James officially took legal possession of the estate 3 days after the dinner confrontation. The announcement went public the next morning. James Elwood, son of Henry Elwood Sr., claims legal right to entire estate. Disputed heiress Miriam Elwood under investigation for fraudulent will. The return of the real Elwood bloodline sends shockwaves through high society. Miriam tried to spin it. Claimed she had been manipulated by advisors, lied to by legal counsel, emotionally vulnerable. The public didn't buy it. As I released everything. Audio, video, documentation. Even the original will signed by grandfather with my name scratched out and replaced by Miriam's handwriting. The scandal made national headlines. And behind the cameras, behind the gasps and commentary, I watched her fall. Eugenia cracked completely. She was moved to a private psychiatric facility under James's order, not out of cruelty but protection. From herself. She had begun scratching her arms, muttering about ghosts in the walls. Sometimes she screamed the attic was bleeding. The staff sedated her after she tried to burn her own journals. The same journals she used to fabricate evidence against me. How poetic. I visited once. She didn't recognize me. But just before I left, she whispered, "Don't let the fire in your throat go out." And I smiled. Because I never planned to. But the one I had left for last was my father. Colton Elwood. The man who stood by the night I burned. Who said nothing. Who did nothing. Because silence was easier than saving me. He had disappeared from the estate the night James returned. But I knew where he'd go. The family's lake house tucked in the Vermont woods. The place where he used to take me fishing when I was 7. Back when I still believed he loved me. I went alone. No disguise. He was outside chopping wood. He looked up. Froze. For a second he looked tired. Then he said, "So, you're alive." "I was always alive," I said. "You just pretended not to see it." He nodded. "James told me you remembered everything." He didn't have to. Silence settled between us. Then he said, "You don't understand the weight of a name, Serafina." "No," I said softly. "But you don't understand the cost of a lie." We sat by the fire that night, the one he didn't light to kill me. He poured brandy. Neither of us drank. "I didn't know they'd kill you," he said. "You didn't need to know. You just had to look away. I was trying to hold the family together." "And I was the crack in the floorboards," I murmured. He didn't argue. And that's when I knew. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't even a man. He was a coward. A rich, polished, obedient coward. I stood, leaving the deed to the Vermont house on the table. "I don't need vengeance from you," I said. "You already live in it." Then I walked away. And didn't look back. The final stage was the house. The Elwood mansion. My tomb. My prison. My stage. No. My canvas. James and I walked through its halls one last time. Room by room. Memory by memory. We decided not to sell it. We decided to demolish it. But not quietly. We hosted one final gala. A black-tie invitation-only event. The closing of the Elwood estate. A night of reflection. The press thought it was symbolic. Poetic. They didn't realize the poetry was vengeance. Guests arrived in gowns and tuxedos, sipping champagne, laughing under the chandeliers. But every wall held a screen. Every hallway looped footage. My last birthday. And my disappearance. The forged documents. The fire. The aftermath. And the final reveal, James stepping into his inheritance. And me stepping into my truth. The truth they tried to kill. Miriam showed up late. In black velvet. No pearls. People avoided her like she carried the plague. Eugenia wasn't there. Neither was Colton. But their names were etched in every whisper. When I stepped on stage with James beside me, the crowd hushed. I wore white, not as a bride but as the ghost they never buried. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady. "You've all heard the stories. You've all read the headlines. And now, you'll witness the final chapter." A spotlight turned to the projection behind us. The Elwood mansion. Drone footage. High definition. Then a countdown. 10. 9. Miriam's lips parted. Gasps echoed. 7. James stood beside me, silent and strong. 6. 5. I didn't blink. 4. The house where I was killed. 3. Where they stole everything. 2. Where they thought they could get away with it. 1. Boom. The screen erupted in white flash. The house collapsed. Stone and wood and blood-soaked history crumbling into nothing. Gone. Just like the lies. In the weeks after the demolition, the news couldn't stop talking. Elwood estate destroyed in symbolic finale. The end of a dynasty. Heir returns. Sister revealed to be alive. Elwood scandal unfolds in global headlines. From maid to millionaire. The truth behind the ghost of Elwood Manor. They speculated, twisted the truth, painted me a mystery. Some called me a survivor. Others, a manipulator. Some a woman scorned. A few a myth reborn. And I didn't correct them. Because I was all of those things. And more. James took the legal reins of the trust. His name now sat on boards, contracts, properties once hoarded in the dark. And for the first time he was seen. Not as a shadow. Not as a forgotten boy. But as the rightful heir. Still quiet but not afraid. He had a room in the city now, an office downtown. Yet every week he came to the foundation we built together. The House of Ashes. A place for the silenced. A place for girls who were told to stay quiet, to behave, to be grateful. A place for anyone who was ever erased, and decided to come back louder. As for me, I kept my name. Serafina Elwood. No more aliases. No more maid uniforms. No more hiding. But I didn't return to the old world. I didn't want marble halls or engraved gates. I wanted impact. So I stayed where the fire was still warm, working with victims, sharing my story on my terms, testifying in trials where the power imbalance used to tilt the wrong way. Miriam was charged with conspiracy to defraud an estate. Sentenced to 2 years under house arrest. The same house she once stole from me. Now stripped of its staff, power, and respect. A gilded prison. Perfect. Eugenia remained institutionalized. Some said she lost her mind. But I believe she finally saw it clearly. Every decision, every lie, every time she convinced herself that survival was worth sacrificing someone else's soul. She now scribbles prayers on napkins and refuses to say the word attic. They tell me she sometimes whispers my name. Good. Let it haunt her. And my father? He vanished. Some say he left the country. Others think he's in hiding. A few believe he took his own life. I don't chase rumors. Because I know what cowards do when their empire crumbles. They run. They rot. Either way, his absence is justice enough. Strange, rising from the dead. You don't come back the same. The world looks different. Time feels borrowed. People who once held power over you now shrink under your gaze. But the real victory isn't revenge. It's reclaiming the voice they tried to silence. And using it to rebuild what they feared most. A legacy they don't control. The final item I retrieved from the ashes was my mother's music box. It was charred. Bent. But the melody still played, faint and crooked. She hadn't saved me that night. She hadn't screamed, hadn't fought, hadn't wept. But I think, maybe she died long before me. Trapped in the cage they all pretended was home. I buried the music box in the garden of the foundation. Under a rosebush named Phoenix. Because some things don't need to be displayed. They need to be laid to rest. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the fire, I returned to the hill overlooking where the mansion once stood. It was spring now. The ground soft, the air smelling of damp earth and new beginnings. I brought no torch. No paper. No letters. Just myself. Alive. Unbroken. And reborn. James stood beside me, hands in his coat pockets, watching the field where power once ruled. He glanced at me. You did it. No, I said, a soft smile on my lips. We did. He nodded. Then added, it's strange. That so much blood could lead to this much peace. It's not peace, I said. It's justice. And justice is never quiet. They burn me to erase me. But fire doesn't just destroy, it transforms. I was their heir. Then their victim. Then their ghost. Now I'm their reckoning. And the house they built from secrets? Gone. But the name I reclaimed? Serafina Elwood. That name will outlast them all. Written on the walls of the House of Ashes. Spoken by the women who rise after silence. And whispered in the nightmares of the ones who once lit the match. Because in the end you can kill a girl. But you cannot kill a legacy that chooses to rise. The end.